The first thing I saw was an old woman standing at the edge of the pier, her bare feet gripping the wet wood as waves crashed beneath her, the wind tearing at her gray hair. She looked like she had been carved out of the storm itself. "Tell us where you're watching from, we'd truly love to know, and if there was a moment in this story that touched your soul, please share it with us in the comments. It would mean the world to us to hear your heart." Her name was Margaret Ashford, and I had not seen her since I was a child. She had once been the lighthouse keeper, the soul of our coastal town, guiding ships through the darkest nights. But 20 years ago, she vanished. During a violent winter gale, the only thing they found was her lantern drifting out to sea. People said she had drowned. Some whispered she had gone mad and walked into the waves. Yet here she was, 70 years old, her coat soaked through, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if she was still waiting for a ship that never came. I called out to her, and she turned slowly, her face lined but unbroken. She said my name in a voice that shook like the tide, and told me she had come back because the sea had kept something from her all these years. Before I could ask what, the heavy doors of the abandoned lighthouse swung open. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a long black coat. His name was Victor Crane, the wealthy developer who had bought the lighthouse after she disappeared. He froze when he saw her, as if a ghost had walked out of the fog. Margaret didn't look away. She walked straight past him into the lighthouse. I followed her inside. The air was damp, smelling of salt and rust. Each step she took echoed up the spiral stairs. Victor's voice followed, sharp and cold. "You have no right to be here." She didn't answer. She climbed until we reached a locked iron door high in the tower. Without hesitation, she drew a key from a chain around her neck and turned it. The hinges screamed open, and inside lay a small room, untouched. For decades, a wooden chest sat in the center. She knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were faded logbooks, maps, and photographs of ships long sunk. She took out a single oilskin pouch and placed it in my hands. "These," she said, "are the last entries from the night I vanished. They tell the truth of what happened." But Victor stepped forward, his face pale and tight. "You disappeared because you were warned, Margaret. You should have stayed gone." She looked at him with the calm of a woman who had nothing left to lose, and said, "I left because I knew what you had done, and tonight I am here to finish what I started." The wind howled through the cracks in the lighthouse as Margaret placed the pouch on a narrow table and untied the cord. Inside were pages written in neat cursive, the ink faded but still legible. The last date was the night she had vanished. Her voice was low, steady, as she told me she had seen a ship anchored off the coast that night, but it carried no name and no lights. She had gone out in the storm to signal it, but instead of answering her call, the ship moved closer to the rocks. She realized too late it was no accident. Someone was guiding it to wreck deliberately. Victor shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the doorway. She continued, explaining that the ship was carrying cargo not meant for the harbor, smuggled goods that would never be declared. When she had discovered the truth, she had been confronted on these very stairs. Victor and 2 others had told her to forget what she saw or she would disappear into the sea like the ships they destroyed. Her hands trembled as she placed another page before me. It listed names, dates, amounts paid. The handwriting at the bottom belonged to Victor Crane himself. I looked at him and his jaw tightened. Margaret's gaze was unwavering. "You built your fortune on the bones of this town," she said. "Every family here has lost someone to your greed." Victor's voice cracked with a mix of anger and fear. "You think anyone will believe the ramblings of an old woman gone 20 years? She stepped closer. "The sea keeps its own records, Victor, and now so do I." At that moment, a loud crash echoed from below, followed by hurried footsteps. Someone else was inside the lighthouse. Margaret's eyes sharpened. She whispered, "They know I am here, and they will not let me walk out." I felt a surge of panic, but she gripped my arm with surprising strength, guiding me toward a narrow trapdoor half hidden behind a rotting rug. We descended into darkness, the air thick with the scent of salt and mildew above us. The heavy boots grew closer. Voices barked orders, searching each floor. Margaret moved slowly but with purpose, until we reached the base of the tower, where an old stone passage slopped toward the shore. She pushed open a rusted gate, and cold night air flooded in. The tide crashed against the rocks, and in the distance I could see the faint glow of the town. She handed me the pouch, and her voice softened. "If I do not make it out, you must take this to the harbor master. He is the only one left who will tell the truth." Before I could answer, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness and figures emerged from the tunnel entrance. Margaret stepped forward, blocking their view of me, her voice ringing with defiance. "You want me? Then take me." But she walks free. The men hesitated only for a moment before Victor shoved past them, his expression like ice. "You will not see the dawn, Margaret." She smiled faintly. "I have seen enough dawns for a lifetime." Two of the men seized her and began dragging her back toward the stairs. She looked over her shoulder one last time, and mouthed, "Go." I turned and ran, the sound of the waves swallowing the rest of her words. I stumbled out of the tunnel into the freezing night, my breath tearing through the air. The pouch felt heavier with every step. I took up the slippery rocks toward the town. Behind me, the roar of the sea drowned out the faint shouts from the lighthouse. I didn't stop running until the streets narrowed into the old harbor. The lamps were dim, pools of light in the mist. I banged on the door of the harbor master's office until it swung open and a frail man with white hair peered out. His name was Thomas Reed, and I remembered him from childhood. I told him Margaret had returned and handed him the pouch. His weathered hands trembled as he opened it, scanning the pages. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. He whispered, "I warned her this day would come, but I never thought she would live to see it." He moved quickly, locking the door behind us. He told me these documents were proof of 2 decades of wrecks, insurance fraud, and smuggling tied directly to Victor Crane and his allies. He said with this the whole town could be freed, but we would have to act before sunrise. We spread the papers across his desk, and he began making calls to people he trusted. As the hours passed, I could not stop thinking of Margaret and whether she was still alive. Just before dawn, a knock shook the door. Thomas reached for a small pistol and motioned for me to hide. The door opened and a man stepped in, soaked from the rain. It was one of Thomas's contacts. He said quietly, "They have her on the top floor of the lighthouse, guarded by 3 men." Thomas's jaw set. "We go now." The 3 of us moved fast through the twisting streets toward the shore. The sky was just beginning to pale when the lighthouse came into view. The beam no longer turned. Its glass cracked like a blind eye. We slipped inside through the lower entrance. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust. We crept up the stairs, and I could hear voices above. Victor's voice, sharp and mocking, telling her no one would ever believe her. The next moment there was a scuffle, a chair scraping hard against stone. Thomas burst through the door and chaos erupted. One of the guards lunged at me, but I ducked past him, rushing to Margaret. She was bruised, but her eyes burned with fire. Victor backed toward the window, his hands raised. I told him it was over, that the town would know everything. He sneered. "Then you will watch her die." Before he could move, Margaret stepped forward, and with the strength that seemed impossible for her age, she shoved him hard. His heel caught on the ledge and he tumbled backward through the broken glass, disappearing into the crashing waves below. Silence filled the room except for the howl of the wind. Thomas guided Margaret toward the stairs, but she paused, placing a hand on my cheek. Her voice was soft. "You are the one I was waiting for all these years, the one who would carry the truth." We left the lighthouse together, and by the time the sun broke over the horizon, the documents were in safe hands, and the first arrests had begun. That night, as the harbor bells rang, I stood with Margaret watching the ship sail safely into port. She looked at me with a faint smile and said, "The sea gives back what it takes if you wait long enough." I knew then that her return had not just saved the truth, it had saved us all.